right, that's going to take your work. You don't have to worry about getting a big legacy publisher to look at your book because they're not going to if you don't have an agent, right? Today, with print on demand, you don't have to buy a whole garage full of books and figure out what to do with them.
And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. Man, the word omnipresence. We've heard this word thrown out there by many of the big gurus out there. And it seems like something that you got your Lex Friedmans, you've got your Alex Hermosis, your Grant Cardones out there, and they're dominating the omnipresence. And you're sitting there, you're behind your computer wondering, why does nobody know about you? So if that's you, this podcast is all about getting attention, not as somebody who's already got a lot of it, but as somebody who's looking to try to build it. And so today we've got Barry Cohen with us. He's of Ad Labs Media Corporation. And Barry, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I want to talk to you about omnipresence. Is it actually achievable for the regular Joe?
It is. I mean, we've worked with a number of people that really had no presence before online. And it's all about creating unique and original and compelling content and getting it out there through as many possible platforms as you can, because people are consuming everything on different, channels. And if you're not on multiple channels, then you're missing out on multiple audiences.
The TikTok scare was something that was really brought that to light, where people who over-invested into TikTok and under-invested to some of the other platforms that are out there. And then all of a sudden realized, holy cow, my whole world could be gone in a flick of a button. And so that was something that definitely happened. I mean, we could bring up things like, I don't know, MySpace or something like that, and talk about some of those things where people became really strong in those platforms, but didn't get to some of the other ones. And when is enough of your over or under exposure to different platforms?
Yeah, it's so important that you have your own platform as well, because otherwise you're at the mercy of Facebook or Twitter or whomever. So, by all means, invest in your own platform first.
I love that idea of investing in your own platform. I'm, personally speaking, because I have a podcast, the podcast is my platform, but it's being distributed through multiple platforms out there, through your YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and all the other sources that are out there. Please, if I didn't mention your platform, don't get offended. And so the idea is that single platform then pushes out to all of those. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly. You got to be in as many places as you can. The reality is it's not about your website, right? It's about your overall online presence. So if people don't know your name, if they don't know your URL, your website address, if they don't know your company name, how are they going to find you? They're going to find you through search. Well, what are they searching? They're searching for your subject matter. If they search your subject matter and you don't pop up, then you've lost your opportunity. So in order to get them to find you, you need as much content about you in as many places as possible. So what does that mean? It means you're getting interviewed on other people's podcasts. You have your own podcast. You're on YouTube, right? You're writing blogs. You're doing guest blogs on other people's, right? You're writing articles and getting them published, right? You're getting interviewed on TV or radio or what have you. Then all those things are going to link back to your site. And it's all about having more content about you in more places around the web and making you more discoverable. It's about expanding your digital footprint.
I think the idea of all of that sounds like a lot of work for many people. And they're like, look, I just own my small business here. It's a jewelry business, or it's a plumbing business, or some sort of bookkeeping services business. How do they keep up with the idea of just running their business and doing all of those platforms?
Right. Great question, Steve. It's all about team. Nobody can do it alone. So who do you need? You need a good webmaster, of course, and you need a good social media person, right? And you probably need a good videographer, unless you think you can do it yourself.
Yeah. And that's, I agree with that as well. I think a lot of times I think they start with too small of a goal for their business, and then they end up frustrated every day. And if they would have just increased their goal to a larger goal, they're stuck at that $100,000, $200,000 number, which doesn't leave them a lot of room for the business to be able to afford other people to operate within that business, which means they have to be the chief of every domain. And that kind of a business is a business that's really going to suffer as speed happens with things like AI and massive technology changes that are happening. And in a lot of the things that are going on in the current market that we deal with, I think they're going to run into all these challenges, and they've got to realize that they got to skill up and they got to grow their business bigger.
Right. But to your point, It's what Michael Gerber would say. They don't own a business. They own a job.
Yeah. E-Myth is one of my favorite books. I spend time with those guys, and I absolutely love what they've done. And I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. You can't do it all yourself.
So if somebody says, okay, I want to, there's always this chicken or egg theory. And the chicken or egg theory goes like this, where somebody says, I want to start to get that omnipresence effect happening, but I'm still small, which means I don't have the budget. And what happens for that person? Are they kind of stuck in that sort of neither space?
You know what? Great question. You crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly. Sometimes the tail wags the dog. Now, I work with a lot of people that, we start off by writing a book, and then we parse out the content of the book into podcasts, into articles, into blog posts. But sometimes it works better the other way around. We had a client who was a business coach, and the idea of the book was overwhelming to him. So we started off doing a podcast, and then we started doing articles. Now he's amassed all the material to create the book.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think a lot of the really big superstars do a great job of, recycling the material that they have. One thing I did when I was growing my mortgage business, I used to teach the mortgage agents in a classroom setting once a month. And it was great when we had 15 new agents coming in, but when we had 2 new agents coming in, you're like, oh my God, I'm dedicating a week for these 2 agents. Like, I don't have scale out of my time. And I realized that all I had to do was just that one time record that whole session. And now I have the content that I can now use for training. And then when that training content became obsolete, it now became content for me to use for social media. And because I could just give it away. And then I realized, actually, why don't I just start just training on social media? And then all of a sudden, I'm talking about things and people are asking me questions because I'm just putting data out there.
Look, one of my clients has actually produced an online learning portal, and he's created a whole online university for small businesses where you can go in there and a la carte, either, choose an area that you're weak in, maybe you're strong in sales and marketing and weak in finance, or you can take a whole certification course. And he doesn't have to get out there and do it in person and over and over and over again.
Yep. Yeah, and that's so critical. I think once you find the right rhythm to your presentation, it's a great time to be able to make that as an automated one. I think a lot of mistakes that people have is when they go to make a training course or they want to make an evergreen webinar, they record it once, they've never tested it, and they put it out there and wonder why it's not working. And it, it's so much better to just test it, get it working, make sure it's working, then put it on autoplay.
Yeah, test is definitely the mantra. I came from an advertising background, no question about it. You got to test.
So you talked a little bit about writing a book, and I know you wrote a book, the 10 Ways to Screw Up an Ad Campaign, Startup Smarts, and a bunch of other books. If somebody is saying, I want to write a book, I mean, obviously, there's going to be pitfalls in the process. What are some of the pitfalls that people could run into if they're starting to think about writing a book?
Well, it's a matter of thinking in the right direction. First of all, people are thinking that it's a big, overwhelming project, and it may not be. Today, the book that you want to read is an airplane read. What's an airplane read? You can read it from Newark to Miami in 2.5 hours. So you don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be 450 pages. It should be easy to consume. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the publication process now has been democratized. You don't have to worry about finding a literary agent because you'll be dead and buried by the time you find one, right? That's going to take your work. You don't have to worry about getting a big legacy publisher to look at your book because they're not going to if you don't have an agent, right? Today, with print on demand, you don't have to buy a whole garage full of books and figure out what to do with them. Each copy is shipped, bound, and printed as ordered. Right? It's all much easier than it used to be. It's no longer an overwhelming, daunting process.
It's so interesting when you look at how that's been broken up. I mean, it's been broken up by small companies, but also like Amazon, that the ability to be able to just print and ship, it's just unbelievable that there's no requirement for inventory. It's just gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, literally,
that's amazing.
Let's suppose you're doing a speaking engagement, you want 100 books and you mistakenly put in 10. The process is already automated and it's in progress. You're going to have to go back and do a second order of 90.
Yeah. No, I can see that. That's super interesting. And so if somebody says, okay, but I just want to deal with the big boys. Like I want to deal with that agent. I want to deal with that publisher. Is there any advantage of that for them, or are they really barking up the wrong tree?
Yeah, you know what? It's minimal advantage. It really is, because today, books are accepted. First of all, the state of the art is so much better. The printing now is as good that I defy anybody, even in the printing business, to tell the quality of a print on demand book versus a traditionally published versus a short run digital book. That's the first thing, is that you can't really tell the difference. Having a big publisher's name on it doesn't mean that much anymore. It just doesn't. The niche publishers and the independents and the self-publishing is the way to go, because first of all, the process is so much quicker, right? And if your material has any chance of becoming dated, you don't want it to take 18 to 24 months like the legacy publishers do. You want it out in 3 to 6 months or less. And you can do that now.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thinking about 3 months, your book could be done. I had a guy who was on my podcast a little while ago he was a tech guy, but he had published a book just around the idea that tech support can also become one of your biggest assets in the sales process. And he said, like a good tech guy, he said, I'm going to try to see how fast I could get my book done. And I think he got it written and out and ready to go in less than a month or two. And because he said, this is my one thing, I'm going to get it done, and it's out and it's finished and it's gone. And he thought, how can I get it done faster? Now, he didn't use a big publisher. He used probably what you're talking about. And he used a community to support him, because he felt that doing it alone was one of those things that's really super difficult, because you get to those motivation moments where you need a little bit of a bump. And then he had to be committed, and he had to say, look, I'm going to get this thing done. I'm going to start, and I'm going to get things done, because, like you've said in the past, publish or perish. And I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And again, let's think in terms of the definition of publishing. Okay. It's not just books. Okay. So it's books, it's articles, it's podcasts, it's YouTube videos, any form of, content that you are putting out to the public is publishing, right? So the reality is that today, it's become the standard. All the business leaders, Jack Welch from GE, Robert Kiyosaki, Guy Kawasaki, Trump himself, everybody has put out books, but you don't have to be famous to do it. It'll make you famous instead. I mean, I've worked with people that had no name recognition at all. And what I've said to them is, look, you put this book out and you let us promote it and publicize it. And in 6 months, they're going to start finding you. People are going to start coming to you. It's going to grow legs. And now, not a week goes by when those clients don't, send me an email saying, hey, I just got invited to do another podcast. I just got invited to do another webinar. I just got invited to do another speaking engagement.
Yeah.
It's a magnet.
Yeah, I think there's a certain win that happens when we live in a very digitized world where everything can be changed, and revisionist, can claim the new norm of the new truths. And having a book that is very legacy in its steadfast commitment to what's been produced and putting that out, I think there's something to that.
But, the reality is that even in the digitized world, and even with all the multiple platforms, even with people living on electronic time, so to speak, right? Something about an old-fashioned hardcover, physical book still has a certain cachet to it. It still has a certain credibility that that has never gone away. There's a glow to it. You become an author, you're becoming an instant expert.
One of my favorite books is written by a guy by the name of Gary Keller. It was the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and MREA book. And for real estate agents, obviously not for, compared to like Lord of the Rings or something. But that book to me was super interesting. I was trying to get somebody to read it, and they said, oh yeah, no, I'm going to read it, but I got to get the Audible. I'm like, no, but you need the book. She goes, no, I'm going to get both. She said, because I actually have the Audible going while I'm looking at the book. And so I can highlight things, because she likes that experience with that physical touch with the material, but then she wants to be connected to the author. And so she's got the Audible going while she's looking at them. I'm like, man, you're smarter than I am. I didn't even think about that. That's a great way to consume a book.
Steve, let's go back to something we referred to before, and that was the whole process thing. So where people think it's so overwhelming, we've worked with people that are ADHD, dyslexic, or just too darn busy to sit down and write a book. Today, we'll get them on Zoom, right? We'll Q&A them, we'll interview them, we'll pull it out of their heads, and take the audio track, run it through speech-to-text transcription software, and then edit from the transcripts, and voila, we got a book.
That's beautiful. I think that's so intelligent to lean on the person's strengths and then adapt those into the success by bringing other strengths from other people. You know, a lot of people say the ADHD crowd, you know, they're fickle and they're just here to here to here, but the ability to be able to perform at a high level, you know, just be doing a lot of things, having that kind of a mindset is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be debilitating for some, but for others, it can be a gift. So when we talk about writing the book, you mentioned obviously leveraging other engagements such as speaking and that sort of thing. How do you see, you know, I think a lot of people, when they get into writing a book, they're thinking, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to be like Stephen King. I'm going to publish it. It's going to be my book on like how to do jewelry or whatever. And I'll make millions of dollars off writing my book. Do you see people do that? Or do you see that they actually, when they look at the economics of it, are they looking at leveraging other businesses as a result of writing?
No, the reality is that that's not going to happen for 99 out of 100 people. What we tell people, and they should know, is that the book is going to be the best business card you ever had. It's going to be the thing that gets you in front of the microphone, gets you on the stage, gets you in front of the camera. But people don't want you to plug the book, right? They want to hear the wisdom in your head and the passion in your heart. But the book is going to be your ticket in. You know, when I did my first book, I did it after I saw a colleague of mine who had a larger agency do his book. And I went to him and I asked him, I said, what did it do for you? And he said, well, first of all, it set us apart from the other folks in our arena that we're competing for the same business. And he said, second of all, it distinguished us to the point where after they'd seen all these presentations, was he the guy with the red folder, the blue folder, or the white folder? No, he was the guy with the book. And it set him apart. And I said, you know what? That worked for you. It's going to work for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you know, gone are the days of the embossed business card. That's definitely been replaced with, number one, where have you been published? Number two, have you written a book? What stages have you been on? Those, I think, are so much more than that business card.
Yeah, but you mentioned something really important, and that was about writing and speaking. They're opposite sides of the same coin. You need to do both. All right. I look at it this way. Everybody knows somebody whose kid wants to be the next American Idol, right? Okay. So what do they need? They need public performance, they need airplay, and they need a record deal. It's the same with us. We need public performance, we need product, and we need exposure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they hit on the idea they want the exposure, but they forget they need the product. And so they get all this exposure, but they don't make any money from doing it. Because at the end of the day, it's great to go out and get all this exposure, but if it's not generating a return, why are you doing it? And you've got to really think on that.
Yeah, and there's 32 million books on Amazon, so you have to make yours stand out. Right. And again, the book itself is not necessarily going to generate tons of money. But if it gets people to take your training course, if it gets people to hire you, you know, as their coach or whatever, that's where the real money comes. Right. Somebody said to me when I wrote my first book, they said, you know, you don't make your money on this $12.95 paperback. He said, you know, you create the whole kit. You know, it's Steve in a box with the book and the ebook and the audiobook and the podcast and the DVDs and the CD set and the live webinars and the, you know, live seminars and in-person speaking engagements. Well, you sell a couple of those in your sleep on your website and you're starting to make real money. But you don't get to that overnight. You build it piece by piece.
Well, and that goes to the idea of, I think most people, they want to chase the sale rather than go and market to get the client. And one of the greatest description I've ever heard of that was the idea of a salesperson is kind of like a person with a net running around out in the field, and they're chasing the butterfly and they're burning a lot of energy and they run and they finally catch the butterfly, but it's dead because they stepped on it. Then they go out, finally catch another one and they finally get it back and they bring it back and now they've caught a butterfly. That's one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it is going out and cutting out a plot of land, planting a garden, watering the garden, and just watch the butterflies come in and land on the flowers. And your sales team's job is just to keep them there. And I think that is exactly what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Again, it's becoming the magnet, attracting business to you instead of having to run and chase after it. You know, I changed my business model drastically when my business partner died and we shut down our offices and studios. And I put, you know, we went from an ad agency, PR firm, you know, traditional firm to being more of a publishing consultancy. And now it's just a matter of taking care of people right, getting the referrals from them. And now I'm not chasing after business. Business is finding me.
Yeah, I think that is such a wonderful thing. I think there's a lot of people who run into the financial pressures when they start the business that they want to go chase. They don't realize that giving a little bit of room in your calendar to kind of aim to do both. You can go out and chase if you want while you're building, but you have to spend some time on planting that garden, or you'll be perpetually chasing. You won't be actually receiving.
So true. And as far as receiving, again, the important thing is give first. You got to give first, give valuable, educational, informational content to people without asking for anything in return. And then business will come to you.
Yeah, give is so important. That's why I love podcasting, because I find that that's probably the best give you can give to anybody is the gift of knowledge, the gift of a platform, the gift of, just attention that you can give to somebody to be able to let them to give their message.
And you know what?
And so I find podcasting is a beautiful way to be able to have a really good give.
If your authenticity comes through, if you're genuine, it's going to show, right? So I'll give you a quick example. It's, how strong is your commitment to people? I had a 94-year-old client who was a premier publicist in the music business. In the middle of doing his book, this gentleman who read the New York Times every day was robbed of his vision by glaucoma. I went to his house and I sat across the kitchen table and I read my edits to the book aloud to him for his approval. Right? I wanted to be sure that he got that book in hand before he died. And sure enough, he got a sample copy of the book and he died 2 weeks later.
My goodness. Wow. Was it published or?
It was. Unfortunately, his son wanted to do some updates, so it's been pulled.
Leave it to the next generation. Now, so if somebody's saying, I want to give by producing content that's going to be my best business card, way better than that little shiny thing, and I love all of these ideas, but then I go and I sit down, I even sharpen my pencil and I go sit down and now I'm just staring at a blank piece of paper, and you're like, I want to stand out from the noise. I want to be perceived as a thought leader. I got some good stuff in me, but I can't feel like I can get it out. How do they overcome that?
Well, one thing we do is I give people a thought starter questionnaire, 10 questions, and that helps usually to get them jump started. But, one of the things they have to do is they have to overcome imposter syndrome. And I've run into this. I was referred to a gentleman who, truly is brilliant in the area of innovation, worked for a major cosmetics company, now is a professor at 2 universities, but he didn't think what he had to say was important. So what we did was we said, okay, we'll do this in small sound bites. Let's do an article. And bam, in no time, we got that article published. Let's see, baby steps.
Yeah. And I think I do believe massive imperfect action beats perfect planning. And that's something that I truly subscribe to. I'm not perfect. I just start and see what happens. And, I always think that I want to be the tip of the spear for everybody I do business with, so that I'm going to take all the brunt and then hopefully it makes it easier for them. And that's how I run all the different elements of the different businesses we have. But writing is one of those ones where it sounds great. And, it sounds like, okay, yeah, I've got it. I'll write something small. But then you always get busy and then you always put it to the side. How do you stop people from doing that? They're saying like, I want to get going tomorrow.
That's where you need an accountability coach. Somebody's got to stay on your case, which is what I do very often. And and nudge them, so to speak, until they finally do it. Just stay on their case.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I think one of the things I love doing is teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and coaching people, especially if they're competing. And most of it is accountability. I mean, there's people in the gym who are way better than I am at technique and at strategy and that sort of thing. The one thing that I bring to the gym is just accountability. Is we're going to really take you to the deep waters today, and I'm not going to let you leave for a very long time. And because I know you need this, and I'm going to keep you accountable that you're going to show up the next day, and the next day.
Yeah. I've stayed on people's case for a couple of years until they finally finished the project. But
they finished.
Exactly.
They finished. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think, the idea of finishing is really important. But for them, if you're thinking about, okay, so they're going to be committed, they've got somebody who's going to be coaching them, because clearly accountability it seems like one of the number one ways to be successful is have somebody say, look, we're going to keep you accountable to doing this. But now they're sitting and they're getting the mental block. You said you had about 10 questions or so. What are some of the questions that somebody would ask themselves to unblock themselves?
Well, we'll have them ask questions like, what is your thesis on the subject? What differentiates this book from all the others on the shelf, right? What do you expect people to take away from this? How can people learn from this?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think if you go through that and you start setting up the principles around what you're going to do, the mechanics will start to follow.
But differentiate or die is the marketing mantra, and it's so important. One of my books was actually ready to go, and we get an email saying that stop the presses. We're not canceling it, but we're holding off because we don't think that the book buyers at Barnes & Noble want a book on startups during a recession. Wrong. Microsoft and GE were started during recessions. And then I went to Barnes & Noble and I sat there and I pulled all the books off the shelf that were competitive and just did a spreadsheet. Here's what we cover. Here's what they cover. Here's what we cover in more depth. Here's what they don't cover at all. Guess what? They rolled the presses.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think, and you're absolutely right. There's so many businesses that have started during down markets. It's probably one of the number one spots for some of these large, massive companies is in a down market. It's not in a hyper market. And I don't really know why. I probably need to bring in an economist to tell me that. But I think it's really super interesting that happens.
Yeah. Well, look, during times like COVID, for example, where everything looks like it was grinding to a halt, people started generating content like crazy and putting it out there.
Yep. Now, if you look at a good give for some people is mentorship. And I know you've talked about that before as well, is the idea that, just give people, help people, let them learn, help them grow. And that give is the ultimate of building into that trust model in working with somebody to do business with you.
Exactly.
What's a good personal example that you could use of somebody doing that?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, this woman emailed me on a referral asking me, would I read her manuscript? Would I just tell her whether it's any good or not and she'll pay me? And I said, no, you're not going to pay me. I'm going to read it, but just give me a couple of weeks because I'm busy right now with paying clients. But I'm not going to take your money to read your book. Just send it to me, and as soon as I have time, I promise I'll read it.
That's a good give. And then you gave her feedback, obviously.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah, that's a very good give. That's a very good give. And so when people are giving, especially in that situation, there's a lot of people who would look at that and go, ooh, well, I'll give her like a cursory understanding of things. I'm going to kind of just tell her a little bit, but not enough that she can go do it on her own. And fundamentally, I think that might be a flawed methodology. What's your thoughts on that? And how do you get people over the idea of that they might lose their edge competitively by giving away their best stuff?
Yeah, that's coming from a scarcity and sufficiency mindset. You got to know there's enough out there for everybody. And what's the worst case scenario? So they go and they do it on their own and you applaud them, right? If anything, those are the kind of people that usually will come back to you at some point later and say, hey, you know what? If it wasn't for you, I never would have done this. Now I'm going to need help with X or Y. Okay, I got the book done. Now can you help me promote it?
Yeah, totally. And I definitely think that is the right mantra to have. I think there's so many times. There was actually a manager when I worked at a company called Avco, and he said, the best way to judge a good leader is the people he promotes out of his organization, and like as a branch manager. Because if you have people in your branch and they don't get promoted to run a branch somewhere else, have you really helped people accelerate, the career growth? And are you really building new leaders, or are you just building busy bees in your office that, can keep you sustained? And so the idea is you give all your best stuff, give all your leadership stuff, give everything. And people will stay not because they have to, they'll stay because they want.
At the same time, just yesterday, I had a conversation with a woman that we're finishing up a book with. And I said to her, yes, you want to put this in here. No, the book is not a teaser, but at the same time, I don't want you to put absolutely everything you've got into this book because I want people to go to your website and engage with you. So, tell them in the book to go and download this and download that because I want them to see all of what you are and I want them to be interacting with you.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that I think Alex Hermosi did this in his 100 million leads or whatever book it was. And you go into the book and there's certain pages that have QR codes that go to different websites to say, download the workbook for this, or, go to watch the video on this. And And it's all this ancillary content that drives them out of the book deeper into the relationship that they have with you. And some of those strategies I think are super interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of interesting strategies, I know there's probably a lot of people who are saying, I love the idea of going out and getting that, at least starting to move in the direction of omnipresence and getting it so that there's some accountability to those tasks. If somebody wanted to talk with you or your team on how to move forward on either, anything they're doing with their strategies on blogging, podcasting, or on a book, how would they reach out? How would they reach out to you?
Yeah, best thing probably is email. I use the email publicist740@gmail.com, or my other email is barry@adlabcreative.com. They can use either one of those, and I'll be glad to respond.
Beautiful. And again, guys, that's adlabcreative.com. If you're looking at beating the obscurity landmines that are happening within your business, where you know that there's other people who want to do business with you, but you don't know how to reach them, and you're tired of going out and chasing and cold calling, and you want people to pick up the phone and call you, you'll have more inbound calls to your business than outbound calls. That all starts with having a good personal brand and using that brand and starting to leveraging that through all the different platforms, a book, a blog, a podcast, or any of these other things that you can have out there. Be omnipresent, go out, get a great team, chat with Barry here at adlabscreative.com. Barry, thanks so much for joining us, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. A pleasure.
And guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.